In this lecture, we're going to talk about client name resolution. And this is a DNS client. It doesn't have to be a client operating system, it could be a server, but it's something that's requesting an answer from DNS. It's not the DNS server providing an answer. On an overview level, let's say we have a client that's trying to resolve www.yahoo.com. The first thing the client does is check its cache, and if it can't get the answer from the cache, it will contact the DNS server. So when the client resolves a name via DNS, it puts the answer into a DNS cache, and the answer stays in there for a certain amount of time called the time to live. If the client needs to check and resolve a name, it's going to first check that DNS cache to see if it's already resolved that name in the past. If you'd like to view the DNS cache, your command is ipconfig/display DNS. If for some reason you need to clear the DNS cache, it's ipconfig/flush DNS. So we're on a Windows 8 client, and let's take a look at the DNS cache. So first I'm just going to do real quick, do a ping yahoo.com. And that name is almost instantaneously resolved. And now if I do an ipconfig display DNS, we can see that the entries for Yahoo are in my DNS cache. If I go through and I do an ipconfig/flush DNS, and then I do my display DNS again, you can see that there's nothing in the cache. There's another way for items to make it into that cache, and that would be the host file. All Windows clients have a host file. It's located in the C Windows System 32 drivers etc. folder. Now it doesn't have an extension, but it should only be edited with Notepad. And entries in the host file pre-populate the client DNS cache, which essentially means if the entry is in the host file, it's going to trump DNS, or it's going to override DNS, because it'll be in the cache file and the client will never contact the DNS server. Now on a client, Windows 7 or over, the host file is in a protected area. You can't just go out into Explorer and double-click Windows and System 32 and get yourself out to the host file. What you have to do is open an elevated copy of Notepad, which means run Notepad as an administrator, and then you'll be able to see any changes to the host file. The only other way to detect if something is coming from the host file, besides actually looking at that file, is if you flush the DNS cache and an entry remains, I would check the host file, because that would probably be the only place it's coming from. Now, let's take a look at the host file. First, I'm going to do an ipconfig display DNS, and there's nothing in the cache. I'm going to do Windows F to open the search box, and I want to open up an elevated copy of Notepad. So I'm going to do Notepad. I need to click on Apps. I'm going to right click Notepad and then come down as Run as Administrator. We'll go up to File and click Open. I need to go into my C drive, Windows, System 32, Drivers, etc. We don't see anything because right now it's only displaying text documents, so I'll click my down arrow and choose All Files, and then I'll open up the host file. And let's go ahead and make an entry. So we're going to put in 222.22.22.10, and we'll do anydomain.com. And as soon as I hit save, that's now a part of my DNS cache. So if we go back to the command prompt and we do a display DNS, you can see that those entries are in the cache. Why would we need to do this? The only reason why we would use a host file is if the client needs a different IP address for a particular host than all other clients. Here's the only kind of example I could come up with. We have a website called intranet.company.com, and everybody in the company needs to resolve that to 192.168.1.10, which is the production server. But there's one client that belongs to the web developer who's in charge of changing and updating the site. And those changes need to be done on a duplicate server that lives on the development network with an IP address of 192.168.2.10. Well, consulting DNS, anybody who goes to intranet.company.com is going to be sent to the 192.168.1.10 address. So for the developer, we would need to put the 192.168.2.10 entry into that computer's host file so that when that developer goes to intranet.company.com, they get referred to the web server on the development network. If that fully qualified domain name is not in the client cache, the client's going to contact its primary DNS server. Now you can set a secondary DNS server, but clients aren't like teenagers. If they don't get the right answer that they like from mom, they go to dad, or vice versa. The client will only contact the secondary DNS server if it does not get a response from the primary. And at that point, it will stick with the secondary until there's a reboot, or if the secondary does not respond. Just as a kind of recap for client name resolution, clients check their cache before querying DNS, and if you have a client that needs a different answer than that which is contained in DNS, your only choice is to use the host file on the client.